Hello everyone and welcome back to a short reviews video for January 2022. This is a monthly segment where I talk about those albums and EPs that I didn't feel I had that many things to talk about in order to put them into full-length reviews, so all of those are combined and being placed in this one segment. These are albums that go from 4- to 6+, some of them I do recommend them because they might be more to your liking, others I don't. And with that being said, let's just jump straight into those albums. So Theologian released a lengthy 31-minute track over here, which in my opinion it's not really that much worth it. There is nothing all that interesting about this track whatsoever. I think that for the most part it's extremely boring and forgettable. It sounds really poor, the noise textures are not really that good, and in my opinion it's just not really worth it. This is one of those underground releases that I can't really recommend to you. I suggest you to just go back and listen to some of the older and more well-known Theologian releases because this one is not really worth your time. To my surprise, I actually ended up somewhat enjoying some parts out of the new Gunna album. It was definitely better than what I would expect. I actually kinda enjoyed some of the very first tracks. I thought that some of the beats were kinda interesting. Obviously, when it comes to Gunna's delivery, it's really bad, the delivery is horrible, the lyrics are garbage for the most part, but at least I found something that was somewhat entertaining about this album. There was actually this sort of ridiculousness which I feel that it was really missing in previous albums, which I just simply saw them being extremely generic, boring and uninteresting trap albums. On the other hand, I found that this one had a bit of a quirkiness to it and something that would actually manage to be memorable even if it was not for the right reasons. At least I ended up finding a bit of an enjoyment even for how bad it was. Now the second half would end up containing some more soothing and blunt material that I didn't care for at all, but at least like I said, I feel that the first half over here actually contains a few interesting beats, a few banging moments. Like I actually really enjoy the track Pushing P. I think that the instrumental is actually really cool on this track. So yeah, honestly slightly surprised with this album. That doesn't really say much because it's still a bad album and I don't recommend it, but still I think that this is the best I've heard out of Gunna and it's definitely the most memorable one. Getting into a much more mature and serious hip-hop album over here, we have the new Earl Sweatshirt, which after the success of some rap songs, it makes sense that it could go into some similar directions. It is a pretty interesting abstract hip-hop album with some really solid beats at some occasions. I like some of the loops and some of the elements that it contains, and the lyricism and the delivery once again is pretty interesting, kinda unique, and feels refreshing once again. There are a few occasions where it would actually contain a few different sort of instrumentals with a few more trap elements, which actually I think that they work pretty well in some occasions. It's not an album that I'd see myself return to, but I still believe that it's an okay project, that it's worth giving it a shot. I got into the new Rich Brian EP with zero expectations. I mean, he has kinda lost relevance at this point, and I wasn't impressed with anything I've heard out of him recently, so I was actually kinda pleasantly surprised with the results out of this EP. There are honestly some pretty nice and decent trap bangers over here, and the flow and the rapping was actually kinda cool. I was honestly impressed by it. Obviously there's nothing really exceptional about the EP, but still some pretty decent material over here and a quite enjoyable EP. There have been actually many people in the Greek scene obsessing about this brand new album of Ethismos with Golden Child on production, and I decided to give it a shot because why not? And I could easily say that this is one of the best Greek hip hop releases I've heard in a while. This album goes more into drill, and let me say, this is a pretty solid drill album that it's definitely worth giving it a shot. The production of Golden Child is actually pretty good over here, the beats sound awesome, and even the flows and lyrically, this is a quite good album, honestly better than most material that you would find in the recent Greek hip-hop scene, so this ended up feeling quite refreshing. Now obviously I don't see myself really returning that much into the album, it is a bit repetitive, it becomes a bit predictable after a while, but I still ended up quite enjoying it as a whole, and it is a recommendation for me, especially for Greek viewers. Now this is certainly one of the weirdest and most experimental albums that you would find this year. I mean, the main part that is quite weird about this album is the vocals, which also are the main focus on this album, but there are also some pretty intriguing post-industrial instrumentals over here that make the whole experience and combination definitely sound quite unique. The issue I found with this album though comes with the structures of the songs, as I feel that they never lead up to anything. They start with really promising and intriguing ideas that I simply do not see them develop even further, and it makes for tracks that I would just see potential, but they would never really extend that much beyond this point, and in my opinion there were occasions in terms of the pacing and the structure where the album could have been executed better. So for me it is a quite decent album and contains some pretty intriguing and unique ideas, but I would personally prefer to see it being done in a different way and just develop even further with some of its ideas, which end up feeling like lost potential at some times. I personally don't think that this is one of the strongest material we've heard out of Boris. Now, I admire the risks that they took with this album, going into a few directions that are certainly kinda unique for the band. I mean, one of the things that I can give about Boris is that they would constantly develop with their sound and never just stick into one specific genre. But I don't think that this is one of their most well executed experiments. It is definitely a mess of an album, but not really in a good way, as I can't really get what it tries to do. At some points it's a really heavy sludgy album, but for the most part it goes into those very soothing parts with electronics that I can't even say that they're all that well executed or that they sound all that great. So yeah, I'm kinda mixed in this album. There were certainly some nice moments, but I don't think that this is one of the best things Boris have to offer in their catalog. Now, if you're familiar with the sound of Like Witch, and I've talked about many of the releases of Like Witch in my channel, then you know what to expect out of this one. It's more of the same. I wouldn't say that this one contains some of the most memorable and some of the most standout ideas. I still believe that in terms of production and sound, this one sounds really cool and there are some really nice textures. Apart from that, I don't really believe that it's one of the strongest releases in the catalog. I mean, it's just an EP and it's cool for what it is, but in my opinion there are much better stuff in his discography that I do suggest you to go and check out. This is the fourth album of this new up-and-coming atmospheric black metal band, which never really caught my attention that much. It goes into a bit of a more modern sound that I never really found that much appealing. Now, this one in particular ended up being a bit of a more different approach, as it would also have a few sort of metalcore elements, and it's certainly an interesting album and I admire some of the technicalities out of it, but I still don't really believe that it's that much of an exceptional album. For the most part it sounds kinda basic and generic with its production, and it has a few ideas that I didn't really like. On the other hand, I would say that this album also contains some of the most memorable and some of the most intriguing stuff that the band has ever written, and in that extent I would say that this is definitely one of the most standout moments out of the band's discography, but it doesn't really extend that much further than just simply being an atmospheric black metal album with just a few different elements attached to it. But yeah, beyond that, it's still a pretty decent album. I don't know what's really with this new Faust album, but it feels like a huge mess that doesn't really have anything really all that interesting about it. At times it just feels like a bunch of instruments being thrown together. There's nothing all that impactful about it. I just felt a bit bored after a certain point. It has its intriguing moments, but yeah, I don't see myself returning to this. I don't think it's something really that interesting. The new Lake Radio album is way too soothing to the point where it just becomes sleepy. I didn't end up finding any of its ideas to be all that interesting or that much captivating, even in the sense that they're just chill, soothing tracks. I don't think they're that good. I feel that it's a boring album, even if it's really short. I didn't really find something that much interesting about it. In my opinion, some of the very first Lake Radio works actually contain some pretty intriguing witch house and wave elements, which kinda miss over here, and it just feels empty and passionless. This is a huge comeback, as this is a brand new album of Madrugada after more than a decade since their previous one, and Madrugada is actually a band that is really well known in Greece. And Madrugada's sound and style is way out of my element, but I still do end up finding their sound being quite intriguing, and this album is not an exception. Beautiful production, nice performances even after all of those years, and some pretty nice and cool ideas. An album that is passionate and sounds beautiful and has some nice sort of cinematic elements to it. So I get the appeal. The thing is though that it's a really lengthy album, and in my opinion becomes kinda repetitive quite fast. I still though kinda admire what Madrugada did with this album, and I do recommend it. I'm pretty sure that fans are gonna love this. I just feel that it's an album that I won't really return that much into. I still ended up enjoying it though. And that's all for the short reviews of January 2022. What's your opinion in any of those albums or EPs? Like them, dislike them, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.